These models are very intelligent, but they are not people. Person, hopefully, once you've matured to a certain age, you've learned a certain amount, you've been educated a certain amount, you're able to make judgments about things that AI honestly cannot do right now.
Hey, Guy Powell here, and welcome to the next episode of the Backstory on Marketing and AI. And if you haven't already done so, please visit prorelevant.com and sign up for all of these episodes and podcasts. As you know, I'm the author of the newly released book, The AI Marketing Machine. And of course, you can find more information about that on Amazon. And if you want to, you can download the first chapter at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Rebecca Liao of Saga. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She has an amazing background and really excited to hear more about what her business is and some of the really cool stuff she's working on. So she is the co-founder and CEO of Saga AI Labs, and it's a AI hyperscaling platform building the standard for synthetic relationships through character AI agents powered by some major IP. These agents represent a fundamental shift in how audiences engage with games, entertainment, and sports, and living across social platforms to interact with fans wherever they already spend their time. Wow, it's really going to be fascinating to hear more about that. Rebecca, welcome. So good to have you today.
Marketing's operating system has been replaced. Not upgraded, not improved. Replaced, completely and totally replaced. AI isn't a tool you bolt onto your existing marketing organization. It's a fundamental redesign of how marketing thinks, operates, and creates value. And most CMOs are already behind. The AI marketing machine is the field guide for marketing leaders who want to get ahead of that curve. Built on more than a decade of the marketing machine methodology and interviews with over 100 CMOs, this book shows you how to harness generative and analytic AI together, without losing the human edge that makes great marketing unforgettable. This isn't theory, this is the playbook. How to redesign your team, how to build AI into the foundation of how you work, how to prove ROI in the boardroom, and how to lead the intelligent marketing machine that wins in the marketplace. Marketing's future is already here. The question is whether you're building it or watching someone else do it. The AI marketing machine, available now.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. It's great to be with you. Once again, big fan of the show and really happy we get to spend some time together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what is your backstory on AI and marketing? How did you get involved in all of this really cool stuff?
So I'll talk about the Saga journey, and then I'll talk a little bit about my own personal journey and how it is that everything I've done in my career so far has really led to this. As you mentioned, what Saga does is character agents. That is our superpower, is bringing these characters from gaming, entertainment, from sports leagues, from consumer brands to life as 24/7 AI agents. And so these agents can think and feel on their own. They are completely trained on the lore and the background of the character. And any sort of brand guidelines that the customers we work with attach to these characters, the agents observe those as well. So these characters are truly really valuable IP that has come to life. Now, this is technology that we had been developing for a couple years already, and the original inspiration for it was Saga has always been very deep into gaming, and we thought that character agents would be wonderful as what's known as NPCs in gaming, so non-performing characters. These are characters that you as a player encounter within a game landscape. And wouldn't it be wonderful if they could come to life and play with you or play against you, whatever the case may be? However, what we found is that these character agents, just as pure entertainment, are not yet sufficiently compelling for the investment from these customers. So there are other platforms that purely do character agents. You subscribe to them and you talk to the character, or you otherwise interact with the character. What our customers were telling us is that is fantastic, but what we really need solved is user acquisition. So independently, without us saying anything, because we had no idea that this was the major pain point, they all identified user acquisition, user retention, increasing the lifetime value of their customers as the main problem. So to give you just one very important stat, gaming spends about 200 billion a year in user acquisition. So most of this is advertising. And what they actually take in top line revenue is about 167 billion. So there's a shortfall there. That doesn't mean that all gaming studios are bankrupt. It just means that they spend a lot of time in a negative cash flow cycle. And that puts enormous stress on the studios. That's why you see a lot of the contraction in the industry. The same thing is happening to a certain extent across other consumer facing brands. So, entertainment, this is a big problem. But in general, consumer brands, and then increasingly what we found is in sports organizations, this was also a problem. So, how do you really engage the user and retain them and keep interesting them um, in your product, in your brand over time? So, the character agents ended up being a really great way to form those synthetic relationships with prospective users and with current users. And that is what we have been building our business on, and it's definitely the platform that is scaling. Now, in terms of my own personal journey, a lot of people ask who writes the agents, who writes the characters, because even if you take someone iconic, I'm just going to pick one that we obviously are not working with, otherwise you would know, Mickey Mouse, let's say. So Mickey has been in every single media form. However, he's never been an agent before. This is different because, again, agents can think and feel on their own. They are available 24/7. So even little things that people would gloss over or they would find endearing if consumed in a 30-minute episode, in a 2-hour movie, in a 10-second clip, if that gets repeated over time as an agent, it becomes irritating. So one small example. And also, this agent needs to be able to respond to you as though they were an actual person come to life. And so, the quality of conversation is dynamic. If you're having a bad day, they comfort you. If you're feeling really playful, they are playful back. If you seem to be sort of a more introverted person, you don't really want to talk, then they respect that. If you're a super extroverted person, then they gab all day. So the agents have to be super dynamic. So I write these agents. And there is a massive body of training that goes into the agents that engineers on my team, product people on my team work on. But in terms of who actually writes the agents, so I do that. And I have a background in entertainment. I also have a background in AI. This is my second AI startup. And so I have some understanding now of how these training models have evolved over time and ultimately how best to optimize them and then develop your own in order to make them fit for purpose. So Globality was my first AI startup. This was back in 2014 when natural language processing wasn't even a fraction of what it is now. It was a struggle. It was a struggle to get anything to be understood by machine learning at the time. But fast forward now, that's the least of our problems. And so I've seen the evolution over time. And in order to really develop these dynamic personalities, I think you need to understand what it is that AI can actually do and what it cannot do, and what's necessary for a human to contribute to the process. Um, Communication, distribution of marketing messaging has also been a big part of my career. I served in two presidential campaigns. I was a foreign policy advisor and tech advisor for both the Clinton campaign in 2016 and then for President Biden in 2020. So I have a lot of learnings and scar tissue and just absorb DNA from those experiences.
Right.
Yeah, so it all came together somehow in this particular company, in this particular project. I did not plan this, but here we are. That's how Saga
Yeah.
came to be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Well, it's funny. Even though you don't plan things, you plan for the direction, and
yeah.
sometimes things just work out, and it all kind of comes together. And I guess if you were working on the Clinton campaign or the Biden campaign, you ran into some very interesting characters and personalities, and I
Sure.
could imagine a lot
Yeah.
of that then gets built into your character agents.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why we picked character agents in particular, and not say chatbots or not trying to repurpose existing customer service bots for marketing, is we fundamentally believe that in order for a relationship to feel compelling, the thing on the other side, in this case, not a human, the agent has to be interesting. And things are not interesting because they're perfect. Things are not interesting because they sound robotic and always offer the correct answer. Things are interesting because they have certain positive personality traits that are always positive, universally appealing, and then they also have drawbacks and they have backstories. They've made mistakes. You see the trajectory of their stories, their lives, and that is what makes a conversation and ultimately a relationship with these characters very interesting. And so that really is the purpose of turning these characters into agents. Now, when we work with gaming and entertainment, it's obvious why they would pick a character that is known and beloved within their community or even beyond their community as their main agent for this purpose. But when we work with consumer brands and even sports leagues that have mascots, we impress upon them that a character agent is the best candidate for doing the job, as opposed to, again, a chatbot or just a bot that's going to automatically post social media content or whatnot. You need to have a real identifiable personality that people can connect with. Um, and so, yes, you're absolutely right. Meet a lot of people along the way. I definitely observe people very closely, and not to like, file away and judge or whatnot. I just find people interesting.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, and that all gets fed into the agents as well. So it's a very detail-oriented process to bring something to life. It's very nuanced. But again, the objective is to have as compelling a relationship as possible with your users, and there's no shortcut to that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, but you know what? And I don't know, obviously you've spent a lot of time at it. And it seems like sometimes when you're talking to, the AI,
Mhm.
the answers are very flat. So even when I wrote my book, I was doing a lot of back and forth on things, and then there's a couple of nuances that the way that AI responds, and I
Mhm.
said you got to get rid of that.
Yeah.
Not the, I mean, the big one is the M dash, but that's not really a personality kind of
Yeah.
thing. But nevertheless, when I told it to get rid of that, don't use those anymore, then it got even flatter. Do you see that
Mhm.
same problem or uh,
Yeah. Absolutely. So that is one of the things that it's not discussed very often because it is a very abstract insight. But the fact of the matter is, I think the terror over the implications of AI and AI being so intelligent, super intelligent, being able to take over and eradicate the human race, those fears are completely overblown. Because the fact of the matter is, these models are very intelligent, but they are not people. So, hopefully, once you've matured to a certain age, you've learned a certain amount, you've been educated a certain amount, you're able to make judgments about things that AI honestly cannot do right now. And the phenomenon that you're talking about, Guy, is a great example of that because the truth is, and this is a pro tip for all of your listeners, is the more rules you put on an LLM or any sort of AI training model, the flatter it's going to sound and the less effective it's going to be because it's going to bias for staying within those rules first. And so instead of becoming a quote unquote creation engine, it becomes a robot that's instructed to do XYZ things. So you're taking away the thinking, in other words. What we say in more technical terms is you're making it much more quote unquote deterministic, which means that the
Mm,
outcomes are much more predictable. However, the reason why we love AI and why it's become such a revolution is that it's not predictable. You know, it's meant to process, it's meant to have a bit of a mind of its own. And that's the power behind it. So, yes, the more constraints you put on it, the more it's going to act like pure software or data analysis, as opposed to, the full power of what AI can do.
yeah. Yeah, interesting. So now on these character agents,
Mhm.
do you have them only for e-games, e-sports, or do you have it for, physical sports as well? And if you do, then since we just had the World Cup, talk a little bit about how that would work for the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are working with a couple very big sports leagues. I'm not going to say their names because everyone in the
Yeah,
world
yeah,
knows who they are.
yeah,
But yes, what these leagues are looking for is player engagement, fan engagement, community. This is ultimately what leads to just better relationships with the fan base, absolutely. And that leads to a lot more revenue generating opportunities for the league itself. But also, a lot of these leagues make money off of sponsorships. Sponsorships are incredibly important. So
yeah.
brands will sponsor events, tournaments, etc. And these sponsors are paying not just for the visibility, they're paying for this sports league's unique insights into their fan base. So, how do I, as for instance, Coca-Cola, tap into this particular sports fan base? What is it about these sports fans that is going to, they're going to consume more drinks or they're going to buy more merch or whatever the case may be. And the more insights that a sports organization can give to these brands, the more valuable the
Hmm.
sponsorships get. Um,
Yeah.
there's a dual purpose there, but again, you're trying to form relationships with your fan base as these sports leagues. So agents live primarily on social media. This is where most people spend their time now, honestly. And this is where a lot of users are not just putting forth information about themselves, but they're also interacting with others. And this is where, honestly, a lot of the non-AI synthetic relationships take place. Our agents spend most of their time there. That is where we find users. That is where we engage with users, and ultimately, that's where the agents do their work.
Yeah, so it's actually it sounds like it's well two or three or more fold. One is certainly it's almost like a new advertising channel, so to speak, because
Hmm.
me as
Yeah,
Coca-Cola could build this relationship and have some kind of a way to engage with the brand as well as with the league or with the team.
yeah,
The second thing, though, that's kind of interesting is the interaction that you have is a wealth of market research that could be mined by the brands and the sponsors
yeah.
and what have you to be able to say, wow, I didn't know that. Look at this little trend that's going on over here and then take advantage of that in some fashion, or look at this big trend over there and then, glom onto that in some fashion to really make their
Hmm.
advertising more effective. Because, one of the things that we all see today is traditional advertising is definitely suffering because it's just so broad based and unpersonalized. And then here is a way to change that entirely.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of advertising at this point is a brute force of numbers. So it's a volume game. And well, this is a little bit of insider baseball for the industry, but that's the problem that the industry is happy to own up to. That yes, advertising has gotten incredibly expensive because the marginal ROI on advertising is dropping. And therefore, you just need to invest more in order to get the same outcomes. So it is getting more expensive, and advertising is primarily still based off of demographics. Demographics, as we all know, is a pretty blunt instrument now. Yes, incredibly important still to the calculus of who you reach out to, but psychographics are actually the place where you get the most juice for your squeeze. This is something that Netflix understood very early, which is why They don't look at you as a user and say, well, you are within this demographic, therefore we will serve up this content to you. They think, oh, well, you're interested in all these different things. Therefore, even if there's no guidebook out there, there's no advertising algorithm that says for sure you would like this subset of movies. Nevertheless, we will serve up this content. We'll see how you respond. A lot of times, the psychographic engine gets refined that way. So again, this is a problem that the advertising industry is happy to own up to. The unspoken problem that people don't want to talk about, but is absolutely happening, is that companies are gaming the advertising networks. And so if you have X number of advertising slots, then in order to make sure that your competitors do not get access to those slots, you buy them out, or you somehow game the bidding system such that you freeze out others for a critical period of time. And that is fair. The game does allow for that activity. However, if you're talking about this being a useful tool for businesses to reach new audiences, I mean, that's not what the advertising bidding system was really meant to do. It wasn't meant to become, territorial thing between major customers. Nevertheless, it has become that. So a lot of businesses are coming to the conclusion that digital advertising is broken. Just as a system, it is broken. And so you have to find a way to do much more organic marketing and scale that. And that's honestly where a lot of our character agents do their work.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's funny because you're talking about, at the top level, it's, let's say, linear TV or print or out
Hmm.
of home, and you don't even know who you're targeting. You kind of have an idea, but you're not really. And then you have
Yeah.
digital advertising, which I agree with you is going through an enormous evolution today as this hyper personalization can take
Yeah.
place. And then to be able to, like you're saying, add in not just demographic and behavioral, but also add in the psychographic information that you otherwise don't have access to. And as that information becomes available, then those advertising campaigns will get significantly better. I do like your
Yeah.
point about the freezing out. I always love, and this may show my age, but I always love, reading case studies where, Procter and Gamble would be launching some new thing,
Oh,
let's say it's
yeah. Yeah.
Dove, right?
Classic. Yeah.
And then on the other hand, well, I guess Dove is Unilever and Olay is Procter and Gamble. So Dove would launch something under Unilever, and the date is known. I mean, it's hard to get the date, secret for very long. And
Right.
then Procter and Gamble during that time will do a buy one get one right
Yeah.
before it, just so that
Yeah.
it messes up the whole launch. And it's just fascinating to see. And I hadn't thought about what you were talking about though in advertising as well, where
Oh,
you
yeah.
would block out, and but absolutely, so fascinating strategy there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes it's not even directed at a competitor. Sometimes you're just looking to own the market, or not own it, but get a big chunk of the advertising market for as long as possible. Get the prices for user acquisition campaigns up to astronomical levels. Start to freeze out people in the market so people just don't buy because they can't afford to. And then once they have left, then you can afford to lower the prices again, and then you reap the benefits of that. There's just a lot of, I wouldn't call it market manipulation. That's, first of all, a legal term. It's very
Right,
loaded, but
right,
it's a lot of
right.
gamesmanship happening. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So now,
Yeah.
so here I am. I'm building a relationship with this character agent. And
Mm,
how customized is my relationship with that agent versus somebody else's? Is there big
mm.
differences on a one-on-one basis, or are they kind of more generic? How does that process work?
Yeah, so I would imagine it as though you're talking to a person. So this person, they have their own human character, they have their own personality, they have their own mind. However, depending on their audience, they sound slightly different. So if they're, again, talking to a friend who's in a good mood, they sound a certain way. If they're talking to a stranger who's in a bad mood, they sound a certain way. So presentation is slightly different, depending on whom they're talking to. They also are meant to, once again, match the mood. All of our agents, even the ones that are a little darker and part of their character is being a jerk, they do have empathy. They are trained to be empathetic. So even if they choose to not be nice, they at least understand what it is the user is trying to communicate and what they're going through. Yeah. Um, and also, I think the most important thing of all is that our agents do have contextual memory. And so, obviously, we do know every conversation that has happened between this particular user and the agent. Users oftentimes get very personal very quickly with the agents, and so they will start to talk about details of their life. They will start to talk about their interests, their preferences, and the agent remembers all of that. And so, yes, it does start to become a very customized relationship pretty quickly between the agents and the individual users. Having said that, it's still the character, so we still stay within the
Mm.
canon, the lore, and all that. But yeah, it's a different relationship between every agent and user.
Yeah, oh, that is so fascinating. So, one of the big challenges we do some work for a healthcare provider, and one of their
Mhm.
challenges is that if they were to go and mine data from social media or even from search, quite often people put in there either on purpose or not on purpose, but they put personal information on there that unfortunately the healthcare provider can't
Mm,
use
yeah,
legally because they could potentially well be sued for it, and it could potentially be connected to something, and it leads to a whole big mess. So I
yeah.
could imagine though that something like that could also happen where somebody's online and then they're, I don't know, talking about suicide or
Mm.
going out. And how do you put guardrails on to make sure that either if it happens that you can somehow pull back or something like that?
Yeah, so there are definitely topics, actually, for most characters, a long list of topics that they cannot engage with, or they have to engage a certain way. So the use case or the case that we take most seriously is what you just mentioned, Guy. If the user is talking about self-harm, suicide, then immediately we drop character. That's actually the only instance in which we completely drop character. And then the agent is only concerned about A, making sure that you're safe. So we'll just keep asking, are you safe? Is there someone with you? Um, and then offering resources. Here's a hotline that you can call. You're not alone. So that is the one instance in which we completely drop character just to help the user. And we don't terminate that conversation with the user. We stay on the line and then we keep
Hmm.
confirming that they are getting the help that they need. In other cases, however, so if the user is generically talking about politics, religion, um, then usually the customers that we work with, they don't like to engage in those topics. And so the character will deflect in their own
Mm.
way. So definitely not sounding like a chatbot or like a corporate compliance department, like I cannot address that. But in their, right? But in their own voice, as the character, they will say, oh, like I don't know anything about that, or that's above my pay grade, or whatever they're trained to say.
Right.
Um, so there are some pretty strict guardrails around that. There are some cases in which legally we are obligated to report if the user is talking about certain things. So, for instance, anything involving minors
Mm.
and anything of a sexual nature that gets reported immediately to a national hotline. So there are certain topics that are very, very sensitive. But by and large, what we want to happen is we want the agents to continue engaging. Um, maybe not actually having a conversation, not responding substantively, but we don't want to just drop a conversation with a user. So that is our current stance. Everything changes with data, so we want to track data patterns over time of how the users are interacting with these agents. And we do want to stay safe. We do want to be responsible. So if we're noticing certain adjustments need to be made, then of course we'll make them. But so far, these are the sets of policies that we've come
Mm.
to.
Yeah, that's so critical. And actually, you mentioned something about underage and minors. So
Yeah.
is this something that is only available to and I don't know what the age of majority is, whether it's
Mhm.
18 or 21, but so is this for that? And then how do you actually verify? I'm just curious. How do you verify that you on the other end is somebody that has reached the age of maturity?
Yeah, so in this, we have to really rely on the social networks that the agents operate in. So if Insta, for instance, has the policy that you have to be over 13, then the assumption, until we detect otherwise in the interaction with the user, is that you are over 13. Now, that's the first line of defense is the actual policy of the social network. However, we
Mm,
are monitoring on our own over the course of the conversation. If this user starts to mention things, they mention mom or dad, or they actually say their age, or whatever the case may be, then we have to revise accordingly. It's not to say that if, for whatever reason, you are an 8-year-old who's using Insta, first of all, I want to talk to your parents. But secondly, we don't terminate the conversation there. It depends on what you want to talk about. If the 8-year-old's just in love with Mickey Mouse, they're crazy about Mickey Mouse, and all they want to talk about is like, how's Minnie today? How's Donald Duck and whatnot? It's pretty innocent, so that's okay. We'll continue with that. But if they start to talk about other topics, if for whatever reason we think they're not in a safe situation, that does get reported. So a lot of these things start to happen on a case by case basis as well.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's fascinating. The nuances of an application like yours is just absolutely
Yeah.
phenomenal. And then the value that you can bring not only to the individual that you're communicating with, but also to the whole ecosystem that surrounds that sport or the league or that
Mhm.
individual.
Yeah.
Man, I wish we could go further, Rebecca. This has been fantastic, but I do have one last question for you.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
that is, with all of this AI coming online, what would you recommend, and what would your advice be to give to an up and coming new marketer?
Actually, this has nothing to do, well, okay, it has something to do with AI. I would say two things are very important for a marketer in the world of AI. One is work on your taste as a human being. We hear the term taste thrown around a lot because we assume this is something that AI doesn't have. And for the most part, it's true. AI doesn't really have taste. It has some discrimination, but in terms of actually being able to identify hits, being able to generate something that is unique and original and cool, I think humans still have a huge comparative advantage there, but only if we maintain it. So we think about, Guy, you're a writer, you are a content producer. You know that everything that you're able to put out there, all the words that you put out, that has been the process of many decades of reading, of going through the creative process, and all that refinement has resulted in your ability to produce the work that you do now. And that is true for every person out there, for every marketer. So I would really work on refining your
Hmm.
taste level, your discernment, your point of view, because in the end, the AI will not be able to ship a final product. AI is only as good as what you put into it, and it's only as good as what you sign off on. So if you are not able to really tell in the AI output if something is just good enough or whether it's really going to be a difference maker, then you have given up your comparative advantage as a human being. So I would first and foremost work on your point of view, work on your taste level. And
Hmm.
the second thing is I would just play with AI because you don't truly know what AI is capable of until you personally use it. And for a lot of marketers out there who are not technical, um, I would encourage them to just dive headfirst in because it's not that bad. It's actually not that bad. Prompt writing, is more technical than actual writing, but it's not that scary. And I would encourage marketers to play with this as much as possible. I'm sure that most people do in some capacity, whether they just talk to AI, whether they ask search questions of AI or whatnot. But really try to do a project using AI. Try to do multiple projects just to get your feet wet with the tools. And then you have some understanding of AI's capabilities, and then you'll be that much more effective in using AI tools. So I would say for any marketers out there that are thinking, oh God, how do I navigate this new world? Just stick to those two activities, and I think they'll take you pretty far.
Yeah, there were a bunch of commencement speeches, and every time AI was mentioned, then the speaker
Yeah,
got booed, and
yeah.
be honest with you, I was kind of upset with that because
Mm.
they should not be booing that. They have to embrace it, which is kind of what your answer is. You have to embrace AI. And if you are successful at embracing AI, then you will get past this hump of, to enter into a good job in a market where you really want to work and things like that. Whereas if you're afraid of it or trying to block it or whatever, then you're going to have a lot of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is definitely something that I tell fresh grads is um, I understand that for a lot of them, the job market is incredibly tough because a lot of these companies are making the correct calculus that it is presently still much cheaper to use AI for entry level tasks than it is to take in someone who has been trained academically but may not know anything about how to actually work or what your company actually does or whatnot. And so these companies have concluded it's just much better to invest in the AI tools rather than hire a bunch of new people and then train them up for several years, hoping that they stick around and that they can actually start contributing more, judgment like things down the line. But having said that, you're absolutely right, Guy, that you can also use these AI tools to enhance your abilities to learn faster. And someone's got to work these tools. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the ability to actually contribute to this organization, I think even fresh grads have the ability to do that. But I completely agree that this view of, we are victims of AI and we need to get rid of AI and we need to tear down data centers and whatnot, that is not productive because it's not going to happen. This is the world that we live
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
And
yeah. And your
sorry, go
advice
ahead.
is
Yeah.
absolutely right. It's
Yeah.
you have to embrace it, and that's kind of what I think we're all saying now. And I think you're right. Do a project. If you're going to
Yeah.
have an interview with some company, just make up a project and see if you can add value and say, hey, listen, for this interview, I did this, and as the hiring manager, I'd love to hear, well, what did you do?
Hmm.
What did you come up with? Because it's
Yeah.
a good way to learn more about that individual, see how they work, see what their thought process is, and see if they, really stand out against somebody else that they might be interviewing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, in the end, a lot of people use AI now in some capacity for their work. And I think that is socially very acceptable. But the interesting part is what have you contributed to this process? So, how did you use the AI, for instance? Or what did you decide to take out? What did you decide to put in? Things like that. Exactly. So, what is their thought process?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Rebecca, thank you again so much. This has been fascinating, and it is such a cool space to be operating in, and I'm glad to hear your perspectives and some of the things that you're doing. So, where can folks learn more about you and your company?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, Guy. This is an awesome conversation. So you can find Saga across all major socials. So X, Insta, LinkedIn, TikTok, as Saga AI Labs. That's our handle. And for me personally, you can find me on X at Becca Liao, and you can find me on Insta at Beck Liao. So look forward to hearing from everyone. I'm a very open person, as you can probably tell by now, and I enjoy talking to people. So yeah, eager to hear from you guys.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And
All
yeah,
right.
hopefully there'll be some interesting real life conversations going on, as well as pointing them in some interesting directions about sports and esports and characters that you can engage with. I'm going to check that out. So definitely looking
Yeah,
forward to that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So,
So much.
well, yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again. And for the audience, please stay tuned for many other videos in this series of the backstory on marketing and AI. And if you get a chance, take a look at the first chapter of my book, The AI Marketing Machine, which you can find at marketingmachine.prorelevant.com. Rebecca, again, thank you again.
Thanks so much, Guy. Take care.
Yep. Okay, bye.